It was October 21st, 1982, just another date on the preseason calendar. The Boston Celtics were on the road in San Antonio, taking on the Spurs in a game that, for most players, was meant to shake off the rust before the real season began. There were no playoff implications, no headlines waiting to be written, but that night, something was building beneath the surface. George Iceman Gervin was entering his 11th year in the league. He had already carved out his legacy as one of the smoothest, most effortless scorers the game had ever seen. He didn't just put points on the board, he glided into them. He had nothing to prove and every reason to take it easy. This was his league, and everybody knew it. On the other end stood Larry Bird. He was only entering his 4th season, but the gap in years didn't reflect the gap in competitiveness. Bird didn't treat preseason like a warm-up. He treated every game like a statement. And against a player like Gervin, this wasn't just about basketball, it was about setting the tone for what was coming. What happened that night didn't shift the standings or make front-page news, but it did offer a glimpse into something deeper. Because while Gervin walked in with the resume, Bird walked in with intent. And by the time the game was over, there was no mistaking who had taken control. The opening quarter began with the Spurs looking sharp and confident on their home floor. Mike Mitchell got the action going by squaring up against Larry Bird and banking in a contested mid-range shot with composure. It was a clean look, but not an easy one, and it sent a quick message that San Antonio wasn't going to ease into the night. On their next possession, they leaned into physicality. Mitchell received the ball deep on the block, and as the defense tried to poke it free, George Gervin slipped into position. With a swift move, Gervin gathered and exploded toward the rim, finishing with authority on a strong one-handed dunk. It was vintage Gervin calm, smooth, and sudden. The Celtics responded behind Bird, who got involved early and in familiar fashion. After a missed shot, he tracked down the offensive rebound and muscled his way back up through contact, converting the putback and drawing the foul. He stepped to the line and sank the free throw, completing the three-point play. Not long after, Boston continued to push the pace. Nate "Tiny" Archibald read the floor in transition and dropped a lob pass right into the hands of Robert Parrish, who rose up and finished it with a lay. The Celtics were beginning to find a rhythm. San Antonio answered quickly. Gene Banks brought energy off the break and delivered a slick, no-look drop-off pass to Artis Gilmore, who flushed it with a powerful dunk. The game was beginning to open up, with both teams exchanging momentum in quick bursts. Danny Ainge then responded for Boston with a fast break of his own. Off a rebound and push, he found Archibald with a perfectly placed bounce pass, leading him to the rim for a scoop finish that kept the Celtics' pace alive. As the quarter moved forward, Bird continued to assert himself. After battling inside for position, he pulled down another offensive board and fought his way through traffic, eventually drawing a foul that sent him to the line for 2 more points. He was relentless on the glass and stayed one step ahead in positioning, always reading where the ball was going before anyone else reacted. On the other end, Gervin matched the effort. After crashing the offensive glass himself, he went back up strong, but was met with contact from Bird and earned a trip to the line. The two stars weren't guarding each other every play, but the moments they collided were heavy with intensity. Soon after, Bird got the ball in the middle of the lane from Archibald. Instead of forcing a shot, he lifted both defenders with a pump fake and slipped a pass to a cutting Ainge for an easy layup. It was an unselfish moment that captured Bird's approach perfectly. San Antonio continued to look for Gervin, this time feeding him in the low post. He took his time, faked the shot, stepped through his defender, and finished with finesse. On the next possession, Banks spotted him at the short corner. Gervin rose and hit a high-arching jumper, effortless in form and deadly in execution. But Bird had the final say in the quarter. Isolated on the block, he backed down his man with patience, then spun off the contact and floated a soft bank shot off one leg that dropped through. It was pure footwork and touch, a reminder that the battle between two different kinds of scorers was just getting started. The second quarter began with the Celtics continuing to build on the rhythm they'd established early. Quinn Buckner brought a burst of energy off the bench and wasted no time attacking the rim. Driving hard through the lane, he absorbed contact and earned a trip to the line. He split the free throws, but his aggression gave Boston a needed spark to open the frame. San Antonio responded with a well-executed inbound play. Mike Dunleavy made a sharp read, threading a pass over the top to Mike Mitchell, who finished the alley-oop layup with perfect timing. It was a rare defensive lapse for Boston, but it didn't take long for them to respond. On the very next trip, Buckner came off a pin-down screen, rose up up from mid-range and knocked down the jumper in rhythm. He was beginning to take over the scoring load for Boston, and his confidence only grew from there. After the Celtics forced a miss, Buckner once again put the ball on the floor. This time, he attacked a closeout, took 2 dribbles inside the arc, and floated in a soft jumper off the glass. It wasn't flashy, but it was smooth and effective. San Antonio kept pace with Dunleavy, who was beginning to orchestrate more of the Spurs' offense. He was left open near the top of the key and didn't waste the opportunity, burying a jumper that cut into the lead. But Buckner wasn't done. Coming off another curl, he rose into another mid-range shot and knocked it down again. With that bucket, he had already tallied 11 points in the quarter, becoming the unexpected engine behind Boston's continued push. The Celtics then turned to the post, feeding Kevin McHale down low. Working methodically, McHale spun to his left shoulder and hit a soft turnaround jumper that extended the lead to double digits. On the following possession, they went right back to him. This time, he turned baseline, faded to his right, and finished through contact, drawing the foul and converting the three-point play. Boston's size and depth were beginning to wear the Spurs down. Dunleavy, trying to keep the offense moving for San Antonio, delivered a beautiful assist by slicing into the paint and dropping it off to his big man for an easy finish. That wasn't all. After a scramble, Dunleavy collected his own rebound on the defensive end, ran to the corner, and calmly buried a 3, giving the Spurs some hope heading into halftime. By the end of the second quarter, Boston had opened up a 58-43 lead. With Buckner's scoring outburst, McHale's efficient post work, and Boston's crisp execution on both ends, the Celtics had fully taken control of the game heading into the break. The second half opened with San Antonio looking to cut into the Celtics' lead, and naturally, they went straight to their star. George Gervin caught the ball deep in the low post, and although a smaller defender tried to reach in and disrupt him, it had little effect. Gervin secured the ball, stayed composed, and finished cleanly at the rim. On the very next possession, he struck again, this time in transition. Boston's defense lost track of him, and he made them pay with a wide-open jumper that brought the crowd back into the game. Boston responded, but Gervin wasn't done. A few minutes later, he isolated at the top and went one-on-one. With a smooth shot fake, he got his defender off the ground and calmly hit the mid-range jumper. His scoring looked effortless, and it was clear he intended to pull the Spurs back into it on his own. But the Celtics weren't about to let the lead slip without a fight. Tiny Archibald, pushing in transition, found himself unguarded at the mid-range and knocked down the jumper. The next time down, he attacked again, slicing through the defense with a controlled dribble and finishing at the rim with finesse. That's when Larry Bird stepped in and turned the quarter into a statement. Isolated on Gene Banks, Bird waited patiently, baited him into the air, and drew the contact. He calmly walked to the line and hit both free throws. Seconds later, he made his presence felt on defense, poking the ball loose and quickly firing a pass to Kevin McHale under the basket for the easy finish. The Celtics ran their offense through Bird again. Coming off a screen and handoff sequence, he took one dribble into space and nailed the pull-up jumper. A few plays later, they ran a similar action, and this time the defense went under the screen. Bird saw the opening, squared up, and hit another jumper. He had completely taken over the rhythm of the game. Gervin kept pressing, attacking left with a long, smooth stride before flipping in a soft layup off the glass, but it didn't slow Bird down. Near the end of the quarter, he took Banks off the dribble and elevated into a tough jumper, burying it even with tight defense draped all over him. Bird's scoring run kept the Spurs at bay, and the Celtics held firm. The fourth quarter opened with the Celtics looking to maintain control, and Danny Ainge wasted no time making an impact. Slipping behind the defense in transition, he sprinted ahead, received the outlet pass, and finished at the rim through contact. He calmly stepped to the line and added the extra point, giving Boston a 12-point cushion as they continued to dictate the pace. San Antonio responded with a flash of creativity from Johnny Moore. Driving into the lane, Moore pulled off a slick hesitation move that left his defender frozen and a tough finish, a sequence that looked straight out of a modern-day highlight reel. It was a reminder that even in the early 80s, players had the kind of ball handling that would still hold up today. The Spurs continued to generate looks inside. Ed Raines delivered a sharp pass into the paint to Paul Griffin, who sealed his man and finished underneath the rim for 2 more points. San Antonio was doing its best to claw back, but the Celtics stayed composed. Ainge once again broke free in transition, and as he elevated toward the rim, he took a hard foul that wouldn't look out of place in a 90s playoff game. He shook it off and knocked down both free throws, adding to his growing total. The next possession, he stayed aggressive, attacking from the wing and finishing with a tough layup off one foot, absorbing contact yet again. As the quarter wore on, the Celtics turned back to Kevin McHale. He got deep post position, spun to his left shoulder, and floated in a clean turnaround jumper that didn't touch the rim. The Spurs had one last push in them as Johnny Moore delivered again, dropping his defender with a stop-and-go dribble and hitting a jumper, but the gap remained, and Boston closed it out, 110-101. That night in San Antonio may not have carried the weight of a playoff battle, but for those watching closely, it meant something more. George Gervin came in as the established legend. Larry Bird came in with something to prove, and by the final buzzer, he didn't just hold his own, he made it clear. The torch wasn't handed over, it was taken.